The painted mare was still bleeding when Jacob Marlowe found her tangled in barbed wire behind his barn, 3 deep gashes across her flank, fresh enough that the blood hadn't dried yet. She was trying to pull free, panicking, making it worse with every thrash. Jacob approached slowly, hands visible, voice low and steady. The mare's eyes showed too much white. She'd been running hard, running scared. When he got close enough to see the markings on her hide, the distinctive patterns painted in ochre and black, his stomach dropped. Apache war paint. This wasn't some rancher's escaped horse. This was a warrior's mount, and she was a long way from where she should be. Jacob spent an hour cutting the wire, speaking softly, letting the mare know he wasn't going to hurt her. When she was free, he led her to the water trough. She drank deep, sides heaving. While she caught her breath, Jacob examined the wounds. Clean cuts from the wire, nothing infected yet, but they needed treatment. He walked her to the stable and worked by lamplight, cleaning the gashes with whiskey, stitching the worst one closed. The mare stood patient through it all, as if she understood he was helping. By the time he finished, dawn was breaking over the eastern hills. Jacob stood in his doorway, coffee cup in hand, staring at the painted horse in his corral. He knew what everyone in town would tell him to do: keep her, sell her, or put her down. Nobody returned horses to the Apache, not anymore. Not after the raids, the burnings, the bodies found in the desert with arrows still buried in them. The territory was at war, even if nobody called it that officially. Settlers pushed west, Apache pushed back, and men on both sides died for land that had belonged to someone else before either of them claimed it. But Jacob had seen enough killing. He'd worn a Union uniform for 4 years, watched boys younger than his own son bleed out in Virginia mud, come home to find his wife and child taken by fever while he was gone. The war had taught him that violence only bred more violence, and he was tired. Bone tired of death and choosing sides and doing what everyone expected instead of what was right. The mare nickered softly from the corral. Jacob made his decision. He was going to return her. The town of Redemption Flats sat 12 miles south, a collection of weathered buildings that served the scattered ranches and mining claims in the territory. Jacob rode in mid-morning, leading the painted mare on a rope. He tied both horses outside the trading post and went inside. Frank Bellamy stood behind the counter, a grizzled man with a beard stained yellow from tobacco. He looked up when Jacob entered, then looked past him through the window at the horses outside. "That's an Apache horse," Frank said flatly. "I know," Jacob replied. "Found her caught in wire behind my place. Patched her up." Frank's eyes narrowed. "You planning to keep her? Planning to return her?" The silence that followed was heavy. Frank set down the ledger he'd been working on. "You've lost your mind." "Maybe," Jacob said, "but it's the right thing to do." "The right thing?" Frank's voice rose. "Jacob, they raided the Patterson place 2 weeks ago. Burned the house, killed the old man, took everything that wasn't nailed down. You want to ride into their camp and hand them back a warhorse? They'll kill you for the effort. Or they'll appreciate getting their property back," Jacob said calmly. "Either way, the horse doesn't belong to me." Frank shook his head. "Listen to yourself. You sound like a damn missionary. This is Apache territory. They don't play by our rules." "Our rules," Jacob repeated. "You mean the rules where we take their land and act surprised when they fight back?" "Careful, Marlowe." Frank's tone turned cold. "People hear you talking like that. They'll think you sympathize with the enemy." "I sympathize with anyone who's trying to survive," Jacob said. "Same as I'm trying to do. Now, do you know where their camps are these days? North or west?" Frank stared at him for a long moment. Then he spat tobacco juice into a can behind the counter. "Northwest. Maybe 20 miles into the canyons. But I'm telling you, Jacob, You ride out there, you won't come back." "Then you can have my ranch," Jacob said. He turned and walked out before Frank could respond. If you're watching from somewhere far from these frontier lands, drop a comment and let us know what city you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and leave us a like. It helps us bring you more tales from the Old West that show how honor and choice shaped the destiny of men who refused to let violence have the final word. Jacob rode northwest for 3 hours before he saw the first sign. A cairn of stones stacked deliberately on a ridge, marking territory. He'd crossed into Apache land. The painted mare seemed to sense it too. Her ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring as she tested the wind. Jacob kept his rifle in its scabbard, his hands visible. If they were watching, and he had no doubt they were, he wanted them to see he wasn't looking for a fight. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the scrubland. Jacob's canteen was half empty when he spotted the riders. 3 of them, appearing from behind rock formations like ghosts materializing from stone. They spread out in a line, blocking his path. Jacob reined in his horse and waited. The Apache warriors sat motionless on their mounts, studying him. 2 carried rifles, the third a bow with arrows already nocked. Their faces were hard, unreadable. Jacob raised one hand slowly, palm out. With his other hand, he gestured to the painted mare. "I found your horse," he called out. "She was hurt. I fixed her up. I'm bringing her back." The warriors didn't respond. They just watched, calculating, deciding whether he was a threat or a fool. Maybe both. Jacob kept his hand raised, his posture non-threatening. "I mean no harm. I just want to return what's yours." One of the warriors, older than the others with grey streaking his long black hair, said something in Apache. Sharp, commanding. The other 2 flanked out wider, circling. Jacob's heart hammered, but he didn't reach for his rifle. That would be suicide. The older warrior rode forward slowly until he was 20 feet away. He looked at the painted mare, then at Jacob, then back at the mare. His eyes lingered on the fresh stitches across her flank. He spoke again, this time in broken English. "You do this?" He pointed at the stitching. "Yes," Jacob said. "She was caught in wire, bad cuts. I cleaned them, sewed them up. She'll heal." "Why?" The question was simple but weighted with suspicion. "Because she needed help," Jacob said. "Because she's a good horse and didn't deserve to suffer." The warrior studied Jacob's face, searching for deception. "You steal horse. Now bring back. Want reward." "No reward," Jacob said firmly. "I didn't steal her. I found her, and she belongs to you, not me." The warrior's expression shifted slightly. Not quite trust, but something less hostile. He turned and called out to the others. They responded, lowering their weapons but remaining alert. The older warrior looked back at Jacob. "You come," he said. It wasn't a request. He turned his horse and started riding deeper into the canyon. The other 2 warriors positioned themselves behind Jacob, bracketing him. Jacob had no choice but to follow. They rode for another hour, winding through narrow passages between red rock walls that towered overhead. The sun disappeared behind the cliffs, casting everything in shadow. Jacob's mouth was dry, but he didn't reach for his canteen. He kept his hands on the reins, his posture calm, even though his mind was screaming at him that he'd made a terrible mistake. The canyon opened into a wider valley. Wickiups dotted the landscape, traditional Apache shelters made of brush and hide. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Women looked up as the riders passed. Children stopped playing to stare. Warriors emerged from shelters, hands on weapons. Jacob was very aware that he was the only white man for miles, surrounded by people who had every reason to hate him. They stopped in the center of the camp. The older warrior dismounted and gestured for Jacob to do the same. Jacob climbed down, legs stiff from hours in the saddle. A man emerged from the largest wickiup. He was tall, powerfully built, with a face that bore the scars of a lifetime of fighting. He wore no war paint, but he didn't need it. Authority radiated from him like heat from fire. This was the chief. The older warrior spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing to Jacob and the painted mare. The chief listened without expression, his dark eyes fixed on Jacob the entire time. When the warrior finished, the chief stepped forward. He walked around the mare slowly, examining her injuries, running his hand along her neck. She nuzzled his shoulder, recognizing her owner. The chief's jaw tightened when he saw the stitches. Then he turned to Jacob. "My brother's horse," he said in clear English. "Stolen 3 days ago. Raiders attack, kill 2 of our young men, take 4 horses. We track them to White Man's Town. Horses gone, sold or hidden." He paused. "We think we never see her again." "I'm sorry about your men," Jacob said quietly, "and I'm sorry someone stole from you. But I had nothing to do with that. I found her hurt, and I brought her home." The chief's eyes bore into him. "You know what happened if my people find White Man with our horse? We kill him, think he is thief." "I know," Jacob said. "I came anyway." "Why?" It was the same question the warrior had asked, but coming from the chief, it carried more weight. Jacob chose his words carefully. "Because I've seen enough of people taking what isn't theirs and calling it justified. I've seen enough killing over misunderstandings. Your horse was hurt and needed help. After that, she needed to come home. That's all." The chief studied him for a long moment. Then he turned and spoke to the gathered warriors in Apache. Some nodded, others looked skeptical. One young warrior shouted something that sounded like a challenge. The chief raised his hand, and silence fell immediately. He turned back to Jacob. "You do something no white man do. You return what was stolen. You show respect." He paused, considering. "But trust is not easy. My people have been lied to many times. Promises broken, treaties ignored, land taken. How do I know you tell truth, that you are not scout, sent to find our camp?" "You don't," Jacob admitted. "You'll have to decide for yourself whether I'm telling the truth or not. But I'll tell you this. I came alone, with no weapons drawn. If I wanted to bring trouble to your people, this would be a stupid way to do it." A ghost of something, maybe amusement, flickered across the chief's face. Stupid or brave? Maybe same thing. He called out an order. 2 warriors approached and took Jacob's rifle from his saddle. They also took his revolver from his hip. Jacob didn't resist. The chief gestured toward the wickiup. "You stay. We watch. We decide if you speak truth or lie. If truth, you live. If lie..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Jacob was escorted to a smaller shelter at the edge of camp. They didn't tie him, but 2 warriors positioned themselves outside, making it clear he was a prisoner. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Jacob sat on the ground and waited to learn if his choice would cost him his life. The hours crawled past. Jacob sat in the shelter, listening to the sounds of the camp. Children laughing, women talking, the clang of metal being worked. Normal life, the same as any settlement, just different language and customs. It was easy to forget that when all you heard were stories of raids and violence. He thought about his ranch, sitting empty. If he didn't come back, Frank would spread the word, and someone would claim it. His horses, his land, the cabin he'd built with his own hands, all of it would go to someone else, but he'd made his choice. He'd rather die doing the right thing than live with the weight of doing wrong. As sunset painted the sky orange and red, the chief appeared at the entrance to the shelter. "Come," he said. Jacob stood and followed him to the center of camp. A large fire burned there now, warriors and elders gathered around it. Jacob was positioned in the center, visible to all. The chief raised his hand, and silence fell. "This man," the chief said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "brought back my brother's horse, healed her wounds, rode into our land alone to return what was stolen." He paused, letting that sink in. "Some say we should kill him. He is white. He comes from people who take our land, break promises, hunt us like animals." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jacob's pulse quickened. "But," the chief continued, his voice cutting through the noise, "he did not take. He gave back. He did not lie. He told truth. He showed respect when he could have shown greed." The chief turned to face Jacob directly. "Our people have code. When someone shows honor, we answer with honor. When someone shows respect, we give respect." He reached into his belt and pulled out a leather cord strung with distinctive beads and a small carved stone. He held it up for everyone to see. "This is mark of safe passage. Any Apache see this, they know bearer is under our protection. No harm will come to him in our territory." He placed the cord around Jacob's neck. The weight of it settled against his chest. "You have earned this," the chief said quietly, so only Jacob could hear. "But understand, if other white men see you wear this, they will call you traitor. They will not understand. They will think you have chosen side." "Maybe I have," Jacob said. The chief's eyes flickered with something that might have been respect. He stepped back and raised his voice again. "This man is friend to our people. Let it be known." The warriors around the fire nodded. Some still looked skeptical, but they accepted their chief's judgment. Jacob felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. He wasn't going to die today. The chief gestured toward the edge of camp. "Your weapons are with your horse. You are free to go." Jacob nodded his thanks. As he turned to leave, the chief called out one more time, "White man, what is your name?" "Jacob Marlowe." "Jacob Marlowe," the chief repeated, as if testing the words. "My name is Nantai. It means brave one in my language. I think maybe your name should have similar meaning, because only brave man, or very foolish man, does what you did today." "Probably a bit of both," Jacob admitted. For the first time, Nantai smiled. It was brief, but genuine. "Go home, Jacob Marlowe. Live in peace. If you see Apache on your land, do not fear. They will not harm you. You have my word." Jacob walked to where his horse was tied. His rifle and revolver had been returned, placed carefully against his saddle. He mounted up, touching the beaded cord at his neck. It felt strange there, foreign, but also right somehow. As he rode out of the camp, he could feel dozens of eyes watching him. He didn't look back. The ride home took longer in the dark. Jacob let his horse find the path, trusting the animal's instincts. The moon rose, casting silver light across the scrubland. It was past midnight when he finally saw his ranch in the distance. He was exhausted, thirsty, and emotionally drained. But he was alive. He'd done the right thing, and he'd survived it. That had to count for something. Jacob unsaddled his horse, gave him water and feed, and stumbled into his cabin. He collapsed onto his cot without even removing his boots. Sleep took him instantly. He woke to the sound of horses, multiple horses. Jacob sat up, instantly alert. Dawn light filtered through the window. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the door, peering out carefully. His blood went cold. There were 6 Apache warriors in his yard, but they weren't in attack formation. They were stationary, waiting, and one of them was leading a horse with a body draped across the saddle. Jacob stepped outside slowly, rifle lowered but ready. The warriors watched him with unreadable expressions. The one in front, Jacob recognized him as one of the men who'd escorted him to the camp yesterday, raised his hand in greeting. Then he gestured to the body on the horse. Jacob approached cautiously. As he got closer, he could see the body was bound with rope, arms tied behind his back. The man was alive but unconscious, his face swollen and bloody. He wore dusty canvas trousers and a torn shirt. White man. Jacob looked at the warrior. "Who is this?" The warrior's English was limited, but he managed. "Thief. He steal horses, kill our men. We find him hiding in rocks." He spat on the ground. "Nantai say bring to you. Say you decide." Jacob's mind raced. "Decide what?" The warrior made a cutting gesture across his throat. Then he pointed at Jacob. "You decide. Live or die. Your justice." Jacob stared at the unconscious man, then at the warriors. They were giving him the power to determine this man's fate. It was a test, maybe even a gift. The Apaches had caught the horse thief, the man responsible for stealing their horses and killing their warriors. But instead of executing him themselves, they'd brought him to Jacob. Why? Because Jacob had shown mercy. He'd returned what was stolen instead of keeping it. Now they were asking him what should be done with the thief. If Jacob said kill him, the warriors would do it without hesitation. If he said let him live, they'd accept that too. But either way, Jacob's answer would tell them what kind of man he truly was. Jacob walked closer to the horse. The unconscious man groaned, stirring slightly. His face was a mess of bruises, nose clearly broken. The Apaches had already made him suffer. Jacob recognized him now. Silas Crenshaw, a drifter who'd passed through Redemption Flats a few times, known for gambling, drinking, and getting into trouble. Not a good man, but not pure evil either, just desperate and stupid enough to steal from the Apache. Jacob turned back to the warriors. "You caught him. Why not handle it yourselves?" The lead warrior shook his head. "Nantai say you understand balance. You return horse. Now you decide what happened to thief. Honor demands balance." Jacob understood then. This was about reciprocity. He'd shown respect by returning the horse. Now they were showing respect by letting him administer justice. It was an acknowledgement that he existed outside the simple categories of enemy and friend. He was something else, a man of principle who could be trusted to make fair decisions. But Jacob didn't want this responsibility. He didn't want the power to decide whether another man lived or died. He'd had enough of that during the war. "Take him to the marshal in Redemption Flats," Jacob said finally. "Let the law handle it." The warrior frowned, confused. "White man's law?" "Yes," Jacob said. "He's a white man. He committed crimes against your people and mine. Stealing is stealing, no matter who you steal from. Let him face trial. Let him answer for what he did." The warrior considered this. Then he nodded slowly. "You not want blood?" "I've seen enough blood," Jacob said. "Justice doesn't always have to end in death." The warrior translated this to his companions. They spoke among themselves in rapid Apache. Finally, the lead warrior turned back to Jacob. "We take him to White Man's Town. Give to law." He paused. "Nantai will hear of your choice. He will know you speak truth. You do not want revenge. You want justice." "There's a difference," Jacob said. The warrior nodded. "Yes. We understand difference now." He remounted his horse, and the others did the same. They led the horse carrying Silas Crenshaw toward the southern trail. Before they disappeared, the lead warrior looked back at Jacob one last time. "You are strange white man, Jacob Marlowe, but you are good man. We will remember." Then they were gone, leaving dust settling in the morning air. Jacob stood in his yard, the beaded cord still around his neck, watching them ride away. He'd returned a stolen horse and gotten more than he'd bargained for. He'd been given the power to take a life, and he'd chosen mercy instead. The Apaches would report this back to Nantai, and word would spread. The white rancher who returned stolen property and refused to take revenge when offered. It would make him an oddity, maybe even a target for those who thought any kindness toward the Apache was treason. But Jacob didn't care anymore what other people thought. He'd made his choices, and he could live with them. That evening, as the sun set over the western hills, Jacob sat on his porch with coffee and watched the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. The valley was quiet, peaceful. No armies watching, no violence brewing, just land and sky and the promise of another day. A rider approached from the south. Jacob tensed until he recognized Frank Bellamy from the trading post. Frank dismounted and tied his horse, walking up to the porch with a curious expression. "Heard something interesting in town today," Frank said without preamble. "Apache warriors rode in this morning, brought in Silas Crenshaw all tied up, beat to hell, said he was a horse thief and murderer, turned him over to the marshal, then rode out without causing any trouble." Jacob sipped his coffee. "That's so." Frank's eyes narrowed. "They mentioned your name. Said you told them to bring him to white man's law instead of handling it themselves." He paused. "What the hell happened out there, Jacob?" Jacob told him. "All of it. Finding the horse, riding into Apache territory, being taken to their camp, receiving the cord of safe passage, and the warriors returning with Silas this morning." Frank listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from skepticism to disbelief, to something that might have been reluctant respect. "You're lucky to be alive," Frank said when Jacob finished. "I know. You're also going to have problems. People in town are already talking. Some are saying you're an Indian lover. Others think you've gone crazy from living alone too long." "Let them talk," Jacob said. "I did what I thought was right. That's all any man can do." Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Maybe so, maybe so." He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Jacob, I think you're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both." "Someone else said the same thing," Jacob replied. Frank mounted his horse. "Watch yourself out here. Not everyone's going to understand what you did. Some folks might decide to make you pay for it. I'll keep that in mind." Frank rode off into the gathering darkness. Jacob finished his coffee and went inside. The cabin was quiet, just the way he liked it. He hung the beaded cord on a peg near the door where he could see it, a reminder of the choice he'd made, a promise to live by the same principles that had brought him through the last few days alive. Outside, the stars began to appear one by one. Somewhere in the canyons to the northwest, Nantai and his people were settling in for the night, and somewhere to the south, Silas Crenshaw sat in a jail cell, waiting to answer for his crimes. The world kept turning, violence and peace existing side by side, just as they always had. But in this small corner of the territory, one man had chosen differently, and that choice had rippled outward in ways he couldn't fully predict. Jacob Marlowe had returned a stolen horse to the Apaches. At sunset, they'd brought someone tied across a saddle, and instead of choosing vengeance, he'd chosen justice. It was a small thing, maybe. One decision in an endless war between settlers and natives, between cultures that couldn't quite understand each other. But small things sometimes mattered most, small acts of honor in a dishonorable time, small moments of mercy in a merciless land. Jacob blew out the lamp and lay down on his cot. Through the window he could see the stars, bright and clear. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, but tonight he could sleep with a clear conscience. And in a territory soaked in blood and broken promises, that was worth more than gold. The weeks that followed brought changes Jacob hadn't anticipated. Word spread about what he'd done, returning the Apache horse, refusing to execute the thief, earning safe passage from Nantai's tribe. Some folks in Redemption Flats treated him with newfound suspicion. Others, surprisingly, sought his counsel when disputes arose with the Apache. He'd become an unofficial mediator, a bridge between two worlds at war. The ranch remained peaceful. True to Nantai's word, no Apache raided his land. Several times Jacob spotted warriors on the distant ridges, watching, but they never approached, never threatened. They were simply keeping an eye on the man who'd shown them respect. One morning, Jacob found a gift outside his door, a deer haunch, freshly killed and prepared. No note, no sign of who left it. But Jacob understood. The Apaches were reciprocating his kindness, sharing their hunt, acknowledging the bond of mutual respect. Frank Bellamy rode out one afternoon with news. "Silas Crenshaw got sentenced yesterday," he said. 10 years hard labor for theft and murder. The judge considered the Apache testimony. First time I've ever seen that happen. "Justice doesn't care who the victim is," Jacob said, "or it shouldn't anyway." "You've got people thinking differently now," Frank admitted. "Some of the ranchers are wondering if maybe there's another way besides constant fighting. Can't say everyone agrees, but at least they're talking about it." Jacob poured them both coffee. "That's a start." 2 months after returning the horse, Jacob was repairing his fence when he saw riders approaching. His hand moved instinctively toward his rifle, then relaxed when he recognized the lead figure. Nantai rode at the front of a small group of warriors. They stopped at the fence line, respectful of the boundary. Jacob set down his tools and walked over. "Nantai," he greeted. "Jacob Marlowe," the chief replied. He gestured to the fence. "You build strong, like man who plans to stay." "I do plan to stay," Jacob said. "This is my home." Nantai nodded approvingly. "Good. Land needs people who love it, not people who take from it and leave." He dismounted and stood facing Jacob across the fence. "I come to speak with you about something important." Jacob waited. "My people must move soon," Nantai continued. "Soldiers come from east. They push us further into mountains. We cannot stay in canyons much longer." His expression was grave. "We need safe places. Places to get water, to hunt, to rest when we move." Jacob understood where this was headed. "You want to use my land?" "Not take," Nantai clarified. "Share. When we pass through, we stop at your well. Hunt on your range. Rest for a night or two. Then we move on." He paused. "In exchange, we watch your land. Protect it from raiders, from thieves, from anyone who would harm you or take what is yours." It was a bold proposal. If the army found out Jacob was harboring Apache on his property, even temporarily, he'd be arrested as a traitor. But if he refused, he'd break the fragile trust he'd built. Jacob looked at the land around him, the vast, empty space that he'd claimed as his own. Was it really his? Or was he just another in a long line of people trying to hold on to something that couldn't truly be owned? "Yes," Jacob said. "When your people need rest, water, food, this land is open to you. But I have one condition." Nantai's eyes narrowed slightly. "What condition?" "No violence," Jacob said firmly. "If you're on my land, there's no raiding, no attacks. This place is neutral ground, a place of peace for everyone." Nantai considered this for a long moment. Then he extended his hand in the white man's gesture of agreement. Jacob gripped it firmly. "You are unusual man, Jacob Marlowe," Nantai said. "You make me believe that maybe not all white men are the same. Maybe some understand that land is for sharing, not owning." "I'm still learning," Jacob admitted, "but I'm trying." Nantai mounted his horse. Before riding away, he looked back one more time. "The thief you sent to white man's law, Silas Crenshaw, He tells people in jail that you saved his life. Says Apache would have killed him, but you showed mercy. Jacob shrugged. I didn't want more blood on this land. Neither do I, Nantai said quietly. But sometimes blood comes whether we want it or not. When it does, it is good to know there are men like you, men who choose different paths. The warriors rode away, disappearing into the hills. Jacob returned to his fence, hammering posts into the hard ground. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was building fences on land he'd just agreed to share. But maybe that's what the West needed. People willing to mark boundaries while keeping gates open. People who understood that ownership and generosity didn't have to be opposites. As sunset painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Jacob stood on his porch and surveyed his ranch. The land stretched out before him, beautiful and harsh, full of promise and danger. He'd come here seeking isolation and peace. Instead, he'd found responsibility and connection. He'd returned a stolen horse and gained an alliance. He'd refused vengeance and earned respect. None of it had been what he'd planned, but all of it felt right. The beaded cord hung inside his door, a symbol of choices made and paths chosen. Jacob touched it briefly, then stepped outside to watch the stars emerge. Somewhere in the territory, settlers and soldiers were still fighting. The war between cultures hadn't ended. Blood still soaked into the desert sand, and hatred still burned in hearts on both sides. But here, on this small patch of land between the canyon ridges and the endless scrubland, one man had found another way. A way built on respect instead of fear, on justice instead of revenge, on sharing instead of taking. It wasn't much, it wouldn't stop the wars or heal all the wounds, but it was something, and sometimes something was enough. Jacob Marlowe went inside his cabin as full darkness settled over the valley. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light across the simple room. Outside, the land was silent. No armies, no violence, no hatred. Just peace, hard-won and carefully maintained. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more choices, more opportunities to stand by his principles or compromise them for easier paths. But tonight, Jacob could rest easy. He'd done the right thing, even when it would have been simpler to do wrong. He'd chosen honor in a land where honor was rare. And in doing so, he'd discovered something he hadn't been looking for, the possibility that enemies could become allies, that violence could give way to understanding, and that one man's choice could ripple outward to change, however slightly, the course of events. The painted mare had been the beginning. What came next was up to him. But whatever it was, Jacob Marlowe would face it the same way he'd faced everything else, with honesty, courage, and the unwavering belief that doing right mattered more than doing easy. The frontier was vast and brutal, but it had room for men like him, men who built fences but kept the gates open, men who understood that the land belonged to everyone and no one, men who chose peace even when war seemed inevitable. Jacob closed his eyes and let sleep take him. Outside, under the same stars, Nantai and his people traveled through the night toward uncertain futures. But for this moment, in this place, two worlds had found a way to exist side by side. And that was enough. If you found this story compelling, click on the video that appears on your screen now to experience another powerful tale from the untamed frontier, where courage, honor, and impossible choices shaped the destinies of ordinary men in extraordinary times. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and consider leaving a super chat to support our mission of bringing you these unforgettable stories from the Old West. Your support keeps these tales alive and allows us to continue exploring the complex, often heartbreaking moments when humanity triumphed over hatred in America's most turbulent era.